Hi and welcome to Painting with Yuk-Sem. Today we're going to be painting a lighthouse with a nice sunset in the background. So let's get started. So because I'm painting with acrylics, I use water on my brush and I add a bit of water to my paint in order to help it thin out and really get some nice coverage on the canvas. So I'm going to start with just some white. You can't really see it, but as I start adding a little bit of the color, it's going to pick it up and be able to just blend it in really nice with that white. So see, it picks it up and that helps get that nice blending without too much effort. So because we're doing a sunset, I'm going to go right in without washing my brush. I have some white and a bit of the yellow. I'm just going to pick up some orange on the top half of that brush so that I can come in here on top of the yellow and start blending that in. So the nice thing about working with acrylics is that you get that nice bright color and you don't have to worry too much because you're always going to have that nice coverage. If you find that you're not getting enough coverage with it, it's probably because either you've added a bit too much water. If you add too much water to your brush, just dab it on a piece of paper towel and you'll see that it'll soak up all that water. That's too much. So I'm going to come in with just a bit of that rose red, and I'm always going over that last color that I've painted just slightly to be able to really get that nice blending in there. So now that I have a bit of that blended orange, I'm going to come in now with that red to get a bit more of that nice color that's in there. And then I'm going to start bringing in just a bit of that violet. So I didn't add very much, just a bit on the edge of my brush, because what I want to do is just start darkening that red slowly without having that big purple line that comes in. So I'm just working it side to side. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of that red and bring that back in. And I'm always using those nice horizontal strokes, and that'll really help give that nice long horizon line there. I'm not too worried. I haven't washed my brush yet because I'm not too worried if it has a little bit of the yellow or the orange red that's coming in, because that'll just look like the natural reflections in the clouds and in the atmosphere. And now that I have my purple done, the last color up here is going to be that really nice dark blue. That night sky that's just either disappearing or appearing, because whether you're painting a sunrise or a sunset is exactly the same thing. It's just really the mood of the painting that's going to tell you whether or not it's a sunrise or a sunset. So up at the top here, I want it to be a nice dark, so it shows like it's night. So I'm going to pick up the Payne's gray, which is that, it's almost a black, but it has that touch of blue in it. So it blends really nice with the blue paint, and it'll just darken that blue a little bit up at the top. And right like that, just by layering the colors one by one, you end up getting that really nice sky. So I'm going to wash off the brush, and I'm going to come back and do exactly the same thing, but now we're going to focus on doing it in the water. So one thing you want to do, because you use the dark color, you want to come in and you want to make sure that you wash that brush and you wipe it off so that you're not getting any of that dark blue in the water down here. So in the same way that I started before, I'm going to come in just with that white, making sure I'm blending. I'm going to put a little bit on top of that yellow there, just to start looking like that sun that's peeking out there. And then, because in the water what you want is a reflection of the colors, so I'm going to start again just bringing now some of those colors down. The one thing with the water and the reflection is that you don't need to have as much, the layers don't have to be quite as wide. They can be a little bit thinner down here. So I'm just gonna see how this one, the paint hasn't really spread out, but if you add a bit of water, it's almost like magic, and it'll spread right out and give you that really nice coverage all the way across. Pick up a bit of that yellow. Making sure still that my brush is going side to side. I'm just going to lighten that up with a touch of the white. And then come down with a bit of that red. And here I don't mind if it's a little bit lighter. The reflection sometimes, especially when we're going to be doing a darker water down here, the water won't have quite as much color as the ones up top. So even if your colors become more muted or blended, I wouldn't worry too much about it. It just adds to the effect and ends up being really nice. So again, just making sure that those brush strokes, especially in the water, are nice and horizontal right across, and a bit into that blue for that last layer. So I'm going to come right across like that and make sure that it's right across. Bit of that Payne's gray. Here you can really tell the difference between the regular blue and the Payne's gray, which is that black with a bit of blue in it. You can tell how it blends, and it just darkens that blue without actually making it black. So then you already have, just like that, from here down, even though you've shortened all of those layers, you have a nice reflection going there. So now I'm going to go right into the Payne's gray, and I'm going to paint down at the bottom here, because what I want is that land where we're going to be putting our lighthouse, and I want it to be nice and dark, but I want it to be dry enough when I come back and work on the land. So I want it to have a bit of drying time before we get to it. So I'm just going to put on the basic coat, and I'm not too worried about the brush strokes right now. So here's one of those tips that nobody will know how you painted it. So if you're having trouble painting because your easel is here, what you can do, you take your painting, flip it around, that way you can get into those corners without the easel being in the way. Paint all the way up here. Get that coverage, really get the bottom of your canvas. Get all that color in there, like that. Go over it a little bit there with those brush strokes. And now, if you come around and flip it again, nobody can even tell, and you've now got all that coverage. So just at the top here, where we have some of that land, I'm just going to come in and add in just a few layers. So all I'm doing is wiggling my brush, and that'll give me the impression of having some of those rocks, even just, if you can't see them now, by the time we put some highlights on there, you'll be able to see it. But what's nice is that it'll break that horizontal line. Just having a little bit of that there will really add to that effect of having some of those rocks that are in front of our lighthouse. Right, like that. All right. So now we're going to go into the sky and we're going to work a little bit on the clouds. So one of the ways that you can add some clouds to it without going in with the white is to use the colors that you've just used in your painting. So I'm going to use the 1-inch round brush, adding a little bit of water to it, making sure that there's no additional colors that were left over from the other paintings. And then I'm going to look at the color that's just underneath, which is here for the yellow. Just underneath it is the white. So I'm going to grab just a bit of white and a touch of water. And then right into the yellow, that's where I'm going to start coming in. And with horizontal short strokes, I'm just going to come in and start adding some really thin lines. So when I'm going side to side, when I come in, I touch the canvas, I press down a little bit, and then I lift, and that'll give you a thin, thick, thin line when you're painting. And that'll give you a bit more of a realistic feel to your clouds. So now I'm moving into the orange, so I went and picked up a little bit of the yellow. I'm going to come here, and it has a little bit of that white still, but a little bit of that orange. If I use the yellow and put it in there, then it's a contrast, so it'll actually stand out a little bit more than if I tried just to do some clouds with white. Now I'm going into the red, so that's where I went and picked up some of the orange. And I'm just slightly dusting, not keeping them in any pattern necessarily, other than having them horizontal and a little bit everywhere, trying to be more random than planned. Now that I'm moving up, I'm going to use that red because I'm moving into that area with some of that purple in there. If you find that your paint is getting a little bit grainy, once again, just add a touch of water, go and pick up that paint, come back in. And now as I'm getting higher, I think I'm just going to make those clouds maybe a little bit thicker, because that'll give the impression of being maybe a bit closer. And now that I'm into the purple, I can really get into that red and have some nice shapes in there. And then as I go into the purple there and into the blue, I'm going to pick up a bit of that purple again and bring that all the way up. So you can see how just adding a little bit of that color that's underneath will actually start layering and give you the impression of the sun's light, just bringing some of the color to the next level of what's already there. So I'm going to wash that off, and we're going to spend a little bit of time now maybe building some clouds on the side, just to have a little bit more of a pattern. And see, this is what happens when you haven't washed your brush well enough and you get some of the darker color that you worked on in there. So I'm going to wash off my brush. If ever that happens, the easiest way is to grab some water, and before it dries, just paint over it, and it'll spread some of that paint and pick it up with the water, and then you don't have to worry that you have to come over it and paint. Worst comes to worst, if it's still there, you let it dry completely, come over with the original color, and because it's acrylic paint, you'll be able to just paint over it and nobody will know. So I'm going to start that again. I'm going to come and get some white and just make that area where the sun is. And because it's a reflection, whatever we do in the sky, we should try and do in the water, just to have a bit of the reflection of that coming down. And now I'm going to build a little bit of a yellow cloud here, maybe a bit of one that's popping over there. So when I want a cloud to be more in front and a little bit more visible, all I do is give it a little bit more substance and make sure that it's a bit bigger. It has a little bit maybe more light, a little more white underneath. So you can just build on what it has. In order to give it shadow, you just take the darker color that's on top and put that on the top of your cloud. And that's how you can build a little bit of layers with it. So here, let's make this one a little bit bigger. There's that orange with a bit of the yellow. And you can see that just by keeping the red at the top of the orange one, that's how you can build some of that shadow. And then because it's a bigger cloud, maybe it has a little bit of the yellow that's come across. And a wee touch of the white, just to give it a little bit of density. That there's a lot of cloud there for it to really, for the light to pick up on. And there's a bit of that orange, right like that. So because I'm going to have my lighthouse over on this side, I've focused on adding a few more clouds on this side. And that's just a way to try and balance, to have your subject so it doesn't look too heavy on one side, is to add something on the other side that has a bit of contrast. So I'm going to wash that one off. And now we're going to come in and start with our lighthouse. So I'm going to use my big brush again. It's a nice square one, so I'll be able to get those nice lines. So I'm going to go into the white and with the neutral gray. A lighthouse is usually white, but because we're doing it and it's going to be, the light is behind it where the sun is. So this side of the lighthouse is actually going to be in the shadow. So what I'm going to do is with the neutral gray, I can add whatever color I want to that neutral gray in order to give it that shadow. Because we have a lot of this purple and dark blue, I think I'm just going to come in and with a little bit of that blue, add some blue to my gray. And then I'm going to come in here and we decide right where, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to put my brush vertically and I'm just going to run it down like that. And then on this side, decide how wide you want your lighthouse and just run it all the way down again. So I'm not too worried about the shape just yet because I just want to see, is that the right placement of what I want? Once you have that placement, then you can start looking at the color, add maybe a bit more of that blue to the gray with maybe a touch of the purple. And now I can start working on that shape. So the lighthouses, I want this one to be a bit wider at the bottom and come up. Remember to try and keep those lines nice and straight by using your brush vertically. That will give you a really nice line. So I'm just going to run that down just a little bit on a diagonal, just to say that it's going there. If ever there's a line that you don't like I said with the acrylic, take a bit of water and come in here, just add some water to it. It'll dilute it enough and wet it so that you can get that nice line back. And then you don't have to worry too much about fixing it after. So because it's a lighthouse, what we're going to start doing is bringing those lines, but we're going to have them in a little bit more of a round pattern. And that'll give the impression, without too much effort, that we have that roundness to it. So we're going to come in and just start adding. There's a little bit of white and a little bit of purple and that gray. We're just going to let it all blend together, starting from the edge, working my way in. So I keep that nice clean edge. And if you pick up some places where it's darker or lighter, or your background's peeking through, don't worry too much about it, because you can always come back in after and fix those lines a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is that on this side, I'm going to leave that to come in with some light. So that means that the opposite side has a little bit more of a shadow. So I'm just going to go over that line again, maybe with a little bit more of that dark Payne's gray, just to be able to give the impression that that side's a little bit darker. And as I go further down, because there's less and less light, I can come in and be a little bit darker still as I move down the lighthouse. And then at the bottom here, we'll keep it almost the same color as those rocks and really have it nice and dark. So with the round, you can tell that as I was painting, I'm not coming straight across. I'm always keeping that really round brush stroke. So it's just that curve to be able to bring it and give the impression, and that will help really balance that out. So now that I have the dark side, I can come in with the lighter side, just picking up a little bit more white. And I'm going to come in, maybe start at the bottom here. And just adding light to this side of the lighthouse. So now that I have that basic color, I can come in and blend that in a little bit more. Take away some of those brush strokes. Wipe off that brush. Now I have a moderately clean brush, and if I take it and I just redo some of those lines all the way across, it'll blend them in really nice. Just like that. So that's how you get that round feel with a little bit of that highlight, especially around where that sun's peeking out. Alright, so now we have the basic shape of our lighthouse. I think I'm going to go in with a bit of a smaller brush, and at the top I'm going to take some of that red that we have up there, and I'm going to add it to that Payne's gray, because that'll darken it and turn it a little bit purple. And then on top here, I'm just going to come in and make that top of the lighthouse with that darker, with the red and a bit of the Payne's gray. Not worrying too much about, getting caught in too many details, because you really want it to be about the sunset and the sun coming through. So if you get too caught up in details and then you have too many details on the lighthouse, the subject, which I like, is going to be the background there. So I'm just going to keep this really basic and just lightly put in some of the details right like that. And then I come in with a little bit more of the Payne's gray. And I'm just going to paint in that deck right over top. It's going to come all the way out. Maybe there's some railing. It's going to be coming up here. I'm just going to give the impression of it without necessarily adding too much or losing too much. Because it's this side again, I'm going to come in with the dark, with some of that Payne's gray, and really get that shadow in there. Underneath here, same thing, working with that shadow because it's under that deck. Right like that. I'm going to bring some of that shadow. Actually, I really like this color, so we're going to bring it all the way down. Down the lighthouse. Let's say, yeah, right about here. Let's put in one of those porch, just a porch cover And you don't have to have a lot of details for it to really pop out. Sometimes just giving the impression that there's something there works better than trying to really go into all the details. So there's that shadow of the door that you can't really see, but you just kind of have the impression that it's there. Up here, just going to work a little bit more on that shadow. And then I'm going to come in, and because we have the light here, I'm just going to add a little bit of that yellow on the side and a touch of white, because that's where that light's really hitting off on the underneath and on the side of that lighthouse. You can see the sun just bouncing right off the edge. I'm going to come in with that white right where the sun is. Let's have fun and bring, let's say that that's where the sun is. And then I'm just going to do those sun rays right out from where that sun is hitting right the side. And just like that, you'll have the lighthouse with the sun poking out. You can work on the sun just by adding a few more layers. It'll make it really nice and white. So I hope you had fun and give it a try, and we'll see you next time on Painting with Yuk-Sem.